Whoa, there's everyone. Look at that. Boom. Big crowd to start the show today. We love it. We love it. Let me see some of these comments coming up. We haven't got them yet. Make sure the comments are working properly. I got to make sure my audio is working properly. You never know. Had some issues. Well, there we go. There we go. People are coming in. Bon matin à tous. Good morning. Indeed, good morning. Where do I sats? And Bitcoin Graffiti, indeed, good morning. It's a great morning. It's one of the great mornings of all time. It might be the greatest morning ever. We'll see. Like all the other great mornings, I noticed that the sun came up this morning. I actually got a really cool picture. I had to go for a little walk this morning to get something. Someone had picked some beautiful mangoes for me. And so I walked up the road and I met a horse coming down right at sunset. It was gorgeous, really nice. So that might be a sign that it is one of the greatest days ever. And I checked the sun, like I said, up. I saw it with the horse, and Bitcoin is running, guys. We're good. We're good. Who cares about trumped up charges, right? Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. Greetings, indeed, greetings, Louis. Hope you're doing well, Joe. Hope you're doing well. So, as you know, we like to start every one of these gatherings, these morning coffees, with the fakest news we can find. We like to start it with Moscow time. Moscow time, Moscow time, Moscow time. What do we have in Moscow time today? Well, we're trying to cover the progression of this new digital blackface stuff, right? We're big fans of the blooming commentary on digital blackface. We're gonna always include that in our Moscow time to start. It's gonna be a staple, just like cow farts and other stories, right? The cow fart suppressant the other day was one of the great Moscow times we've ever had. But how about this one? This comes from Wired, from Angela Water Cutter. And then her other name is Water Slicer. That's her handle if you want to follow her on Twitter. And here's her article, The Magic and Minstrelsy. Minstrel. So the magic and minstrelsy of generative AI. So now it's the AI that is involving itself with digital blackface. And what she says is, I've written at length how TikTok emboldens digital blackface, and I worry that the currency of cultural theft will only become more ubiquitous in this next era of AI. So the AI is already doing the blackface. So AI, bad. Digital minstrelsy. The magic minstrelsy of digital AI. So minstrelsy, it's a new word, I guess. I got some more Moscow time here. This one's amazing. This is from the UK. This one is just next level awesome. So turns out they got the inflation over there too, right? It's not just America. It's everywhere. It's happening everywhere. It's the euro. It's the pound. Everywhere, maybe except Japan. We'll see. And they had an article today. This is from a policymaker, a central bank policymaker. And the headline is, Our money printing spree did not cause the inflation crisis, the Bank of England insists. Great. Thanks, Bank of England. Smiley policymaker on the front. Silvana Tenreo defends quantitative easing during COVID. She says, it wasn't them. It wasn't us. It wasn't us. No. Another one from the Bank of England as well, along the same lines. And this is in the BBC. Bank warns of inflation danger from firms raising prices. So thankfully, the bank let us know, the Central Bank of England let us know, it wasn't them, right? It wasn't what they did, right? It wasn't them. It wasn't money printing that's caused the inflation. Don't worry. It's just these greedy people raising prices, right? So raising prices could drive up the cost of living even further. And we'll hurt the least well off the most, the Bank of England governor warned. So, he's warning, right? Those firms better not raise price. It wasn't our fault, right? It wasn't our fault. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Now, the big news of the day, of course, right? Now that we're done with our Moscow time, the big news of the day is the Trump indictment yesterday in New York. Everyone talking about it. We had Alvin Bragg and the charges, and now people got to react to them because they finally showed what the charges were. Here's Viva Fry, who is a YouTuber and legal commentator. I went to law school with him. I know him pretty well. So that's why I like to choose him usually for my legal content. And here's what he says: the indictment does not specify the underlying crime because the law does not so require. And Viva Fry, that's a quote from the indictment. He asks, now I'm just a schmuck Canadian lawyer, but I've got questions. And everyone talking about this list of 34 indictments that came for the president. He goes on, we're going to take a limited number of questions because, and he's talking again about yesterday, the not having too many questions to have conversations about what's going on. And then you get Elon Musk saying to avoid losing trust of the American public, it is important that our justice system pursue Democrats and Republicans with equal vigor. Whichever party puts most justice before nepotism is the one that deserves trust. Doesn't look like any party's going to get that. Now, lots of other people commenting, even Glenn Greenwald pointing out that the list was a little thin, the 34 indictments against Trump, a little thin. And one thing you can tell when something is thin and not really persuasive, and this never works, by the way, this never works. If anyone does this to you, here's the way to fight back. So it's called list persuasion. When you make a long list, like a laundry list of things, right? It's this, it's a bit of this, it's a bit of that. And you go on, in this case, 34 things. But there isn't one real thing, right? If you don't have one real thing, what you often revert to is a list, right? For this reason, for that reason. The only problem is usually only one reason is good enough for crimes or for persuading, right? So if you have one good reason, in the case of Bitcoin, we don't need a million reasons about why the US dollar is no longer good as a coordinating force in the global economy, right? We don't need a long list. We need one reason, right? Unlimited printing with no transparency. That's it. We don't need 1,000 million reasons why Bitcoin is better than dollars. We don't, right? There are other reasons why, but if you're arguing Bitcoin over fiat, you just need one reason. You just need one reason. You don't need 1,000 reasons. One reason, one great reason is more persuasive. Just like in crimes, one real crime is more valuable to a prosecutor than 34 maybe crimes. Maybe. There's this instinct on the part of most folks that think if they compound, right, it'll become persuasive. Some people do get persuaded by that, but always be careful. When you see list persuasion, it means they don't have a real reason, right? And that's a case in point here. 34 reasons that are all, I don't know. And Glenn Greenwald is talking about that, and he says, just to illustrate the extreme lengths to which Alvin Bragg went to try to convert these charges into felonies, even Vox writer, very arguably the single, I don't know who he is, Emil Heiser, I don't know who this is, very arguably the single most partisan Dem loyalist in all of media, admits the whole case rests on an exceedingly uncertain legal theory. And Glenn Greenwald underlines it here. He says, but Bragg built his case on exceedingly uncertain legal theory. This is from not a fan of Trump, right? Even if Trump did the things he's accused of, it's not clear Bragg can legally charge Trump for them, at least under the felony version of New York's false records law. As Mark Pomerantz, a former prosecutor in the Manhattan DA's office who played a significant role in the Trump investigation prior to his resignation in 2022, wrote in a recent book, a key legal question that will determine whether Trump can be charged under the felony version of New York's false records law has never been resolved by any appellate court in the state of New York. The felony statute requires Bragg to prove that Trump falsified records to cover up a crime. Bragg has evidence that Trump acted to cover up a federal crime, but it is not clear that Bragg is allowed to point to a federal crime in order to charge Trump under the New York state law. So this is that whole thing about it's a federal statute, and all kinds of people saying, well, there's a statute of limitations on that. You can't actually just pick and choose which felonies, either federal or state, you use. And that's why there was no actual law cited in his indictment to say that he broke, because it doesn't actually exist, right? It's a construct of several things at once. So all kinds of folks talking about that today, and lots of commentary. You've even got John Bolton, who is, again, no fan of Trump. I think Trump called him the stupidest person in his administration of the day or something like that. And he even admitted why he kept John Bolton. I had a theory. When Bolton was there, because he was such a war hawk and a little bit. I don't know if you know, if John Bolton's the guy with the big mustache. He's been raring to go to war with anyone who even sneezes around America for 20 years now. He was all in on Iraq. He was all in on Syria. He's all in on Afghanistan. Just someone who wants to flex American muscle all the time. And he was part of the Trump administration. And a lot of people said, well, he doesn't really fit in the Trump administration. Like, what's going on with this whole thing, right? Why is he doing this? And it turns out Trump admitted recently why. And it was a theory that I had. It was simply that he wanted someone who was so crazy around that would, in the end, help Trump in negotiations for Iran and North Korea. He knew if he had a yapping dog, that he might get what he wants because people would think he's nuts, right? That was a little bit what Richard Nixon tried to project in the Vietnam War. And if you notice, the minute Richard Nixon was ousted after Watergate, what ended up happening was the North attacked Saigon in the South simply because there was no more worry about the crazy Richard Nixon was there, because they believed Nixon would nuke them, right? He was such an anti-communist that he would just go nuts and smash them into pieces. And now, he was originally, of course, Nixon voted in to bring peace, but he always made the deal peace through strength and all those other euphemisms that you hear, those political euphemisms that you hear. So I always had a theory that Trump hired Bolton simply to have this crazy person that destabilized the people with whom Trump was negotiating so that he had that psychological advantage. Trump has admitted as much since, right? He has said, I only kept him around because he was so dumb and everyone believed he would go to war in an instant, and that helped me in negotiations. So he's admitted that. So he said a bunch of mean things about Bolton. Bolton's career now is on CNN, just so you know, right? CNN understands him to be a anti-Trump voice now because of the amount of insults, and Trump fired him, right? Because he was, who knows why. So Trump also fired him. So this guy comes and says, the 34 count indictment is even weaker than I feared. So another enemy of Trump saying, I don't know what you got there. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but trending this morning on Twitter was the words even CNN. And I checked to see why even CNN was trending. It's because the amount of people that said even CNN, even CNN is saying this indictment of Trump is a nothing burger. Where's the beef? What's going on? This is weaker than we all thought. And you have Jake Tapper and others saying this was underwhelming and even less than we thought. Now you have Bill Barr, who is also another person that Trump has, Trump had like several Truth Social posts yesterday calling Bill Barr one of the stupidest, again, people he had in his administration. Why is he keep going on Fox? Why do they keep having him on there? And he said the same thing. That I feel bad that it happened, and I don't think it's justified. At the very human level, I feel bad for him. And he was saying this even as Trump was trolling him on Fox. Like, why do you keep talking to that guy? So what is the upshot, right? We know this is heavily political. It looks like there was nothing there. Some people were worried there was something in the 34 charges that actually might be relevant, but it doesn't turn out to look that way. And Bukele mentioned this the other day, Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, the Bitcoiner himself, comes out and talks about what this means for U.S. power projection, U.S. diplomacy, and U.S. place in the world, especially its rationale in general for going to war with different countries and imposing its own hegemonic will, imposing its own imperial code on places like Iraq and others, right? So for a long time, America has said, whoa, we're the beacon of democracy. And you see a lot of people even understanding now that Joe Biden, right, always talking about fighting for democracy in Ukraine, this becomes a real issue for him. And Bukele points it out, because how can he advance democracy globally when he's so worried about internal problems and labels everything undemocratic, thereby inhibiting American democracy at its most fundamental level. Bukele says the following: think what you want about former President Trump and the reasons he's being indicted. That's a good start, right? So this is excellent pacing from Bukele. He's not trying to defend Trump. He's not trying to argue about Trump's legacy, right? And I think that's where most Bitcoiners are. I think we all can see Trump, the good and the bad. I see the good more often just because I think he's hilarious and funny, and I like his writing, right? He's still right now calling. This is just an example of his writing, right? Alvin Bragg shut down New York City, brought in 38,000 NYPD officers, and will spend an estimated $200 million of New York City funds for a totally legal $130,000 NDA. On top of that, the Ninth Circuit Court just awarded me $122,000 over the $500,000 already awarded from Stormy Horseface Daniels. Come on, like Stormy Horseface Daniels. So that's what he says. So going back to Bukele, really good pacing, right? Think what you want about him and the reasons he's being indicted. But just imagine if this happened in any other country where a government arrested the main opposition candidate. The United States' ability to use democracy as a foreign policy is gone, right? Gone. Not even contemplatingly gone, not even maybe gone. He says it's gone, right? Now, I would agree with that. I think we've been there for a while now, but this is a further proof, and I think ends up creating a situation where folks can now really start to see in vivid contrast what's going on, right? If America, like I said, goes to a place like Ukraine or Russia and says, "Oh, why aren't you guys more democratic?" There's no more argument. They just have to say, "Well, you arrested not even just a former president, the current leading candidate to run against the president if he goes again, Joe Biden." And so here we are, right? America losing its entire specter, entire shine that it had forever, right? America had a shine, and that shine allowed it to project this democratic influence around the world, whether people believed it or not, right? A lot of people have been criticizing it. Glenn Greenwald, who we talk about a lot here, a lot of people have been talking about the hypocrisy of the American system for a long time now. Hypocrisy itself isn't so persuasive. You're a hypocrite, right? For years it was, you're a hypocrite. And it was sort of an amalgamation of what did the CIA do and what's going on. But because Americans were so certain internally that they were a democracy, they kind of excused all these little examples. And it was, again, going back to what I mentioned at the start, the laundry list of things, right? It was like, America isn't democratic. What about Guatemala? And what about the Iraq War? And what about the coups that they organized? And what about the blockade around Cuba and the sanctions against Cuba? What about all these things, right? What about the standing armies? It was a list persuasion. There was no one thing you could point to persuade folks that America had become a hypocritical nation and had become more imperial than the revolutionary force it started as. And so when you now have a real example like this, and the amount of attention this has gotten, the amount of broadcast attention it's gotten, pushing it all around the world is a big help to the case. And you can understand that there's some people who say, for example, that America is addicted. That the media companies are addicted to Trump and the attention that he brings, addicted to the kind of stories that are around Trump and the kind of attention that he gets. Here's the quote I get from Sai Mehdi. Pardon me if I'm saying his name wrong. Whatever you think of Trump, it's important to understand mainstream liberals are in a toxic relationship with him. He is the unifying effigy of their rage, a vessel for all their grievances, a common rallying cry. They need him and are secretly in love with him. And that's exactly why I call this show The Breakup, right? It's about the toxic relationship we're in with the one level above that, right? The one level above the politics is the actual money that runs all the politics. Zuby commented on that point this morning when he said, and if you guys don't know Zuby, he's a great follow, by the way, Zuby Music. He spoke at Bitcoin 2022 in Miami. And I know him a little bit. I've spoken with him before. I helped organize his appearance at the show last year, and here's what he has to say. The biggest problem with the economy and financial system is that the money is fake. Our whole society runs on fake, infinite money that's not backed by anything. It's a giant fraud on a global scale that everybody accepts. And if you put that in the context now of the amount of change that's coming to America, right? People are addicted to the Trump thing, but it's becoming fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer people, right? The amount of people that are now, I don't know if he was a big, not sure his Bitcoin understanding is on point. No, I mean I'm not citing him here as a Bitcoin reference. I'm citing him here as a fake money reference. But I agree. Yeah, he's not. I was interested in bringing him to the show last year simply because he has a million Twitter followers and has some idea about what's going on with Bitcoin and is generally on the point of view of what we're talking about here, not being misled by the false incentives and understanding what the main problem is, right? It is the economy. It is the misaligned incentive system of the US dollar, and it is that everything behind it being fake and hypocritical in a sense is one of the reasons why everything in the world is sort of going out of whack. So agree, Bitcoin graffiti. Totally agree. I didn't know he was a BSV shiller. I've seen him, not differentiate. I've even seen him say last year, "Oh, this whole Bitcoin thing is stupid." So I don't remember exactly what he said, but I'm not quoting him on that stuff. I think it was around the time of FTX collapsing. I think he said something ridiculous about Bitcoin itself, right? Not about crypto. So yeah, not citing him for that stuff, right? But he is, and I believe you. I believe you, Bitcoin graffiti. I believe he was involved somehow in BSV. But I don't know. Just wanted to take that one quote. So there you go. But the big wild card in all of this, right, is this. A lot of people saying the whole point of what's going on is to help Trump win the Republican nomination, but hobble him in the general election. They think the indictment, the looming aspect of having criminal charges and all that will stunt his capacity with most Americans and therefore allow a Democrat to win because really only people in the bag for the Republicans will fall for this, is the logic, right? And it brought up my old favorite exit strategy, exit plan, NPC left right diagram. So I've used this one before, but it's absolutely one of my favorites. And what it shows here is that even just thinking that political institutions and the system as we know it is going to lead to results and changing of the world, right? You start to understand that you're really just caught in a massive echo chamber that bounces between right and left, and the talking points that come from each entity that are downloaded into those brains and forces people to argue in circles perpetually forever. And it's hard for most people to get out of this thing. And Bitcoin, of course, offers this off ramp and was one of the first things that allowed people to really see a whole different battlefront, a whole different battleground for what's going on in the world today. I don't think personally, had I ever learned about Bitcoin, I would understand that the solutions are somewhat outside of the political structure that we've come to be used to over these years. So, what you end up with on either side, right? Fox invented this talking points, um, um, speak to your audience, cultivate a very hyper partisan viewer base, and just feed them what they want all day long, give them sugar highs and sugar rush on everything. That's what yesterday was for a lot of people. It was a huge sugar rush, right? It was a huge sugar rush on either side, right? It was a huge sugar rush. And here's one of the problems that you have with the right on this, right? All the people with Trump and even Trump himself and everyone around it. It looks a little bit like a boomer nostalgia fest, like a Woodstock situation, right? It's like, oh, our democracy. Oh, we got to save it, right? Now, Trump would definitely be better than Biden and a step in the right direction, but it doesn't solve the problem, right? Trump himself has his own limitations. He has his own, his own problems, right? It's not necessarily going to be the right solution for everyone in the world, and definitely has issues. You remember, he says he's not a fan of Bitcoin, and one of the things that I always thought when he was president was he was too effective of a steward of the US dollar and too effective of a trade negotiator. And that really affected, in some ways, Bitcoin's capacity to grow because he was doing so much good with the US dollar, which is a net bad as far as I'm concerned. If you look at what Zuby just mentioned and the way we think the world can go. So when Trump was doing that stuff, and when he commented 4 years ago in 2019, "I'm not a fan of Bitcoin," to me, it actually added a few years. Had he got elected again in 2020, it added a few years to my projection and prediction about Bitcoin and hyperbitcoinization. Now, I think it was only stalling it, right? It was only going to stall it, but nevertheless, it was a totally different situation. That's why I've said many times, as a Bitcoiner, I loved Donald Trump won, right? Loved the first Donald Trump administration, and thought it was great for Bitcoin. As a Bitcoiner, not for promoting American democracy, but for the growth of Bitcoin, I liked Biden. Now, I'm not saying I would have voted for him in 2020 or anything like that, but I saw the upside of having someone whose brain doesn't quite work for president. I thought his capacity to lead America would be so much less than Trump that it would accelerate hyper-Bitcoinization. And I've been called an accelerationist before. So in this case, definitely cheering on accelerationism. And I thought Biden was a great example of it. Now it looks like Trump is finally getting it when it comes to that. And what did Trump say yesterday about all this stuff? Well, Trump had a speech. He flew back to Florida yesterday. And what did he say? Right? What did he say about all the stuff that's going on? Bragg, Biden, everything. He said, "Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat in 200 years." That's his quote from yesterday, right? That the US dollar is crashing and will no longer be the world standard. Now you get all these other people, the Joe Weisenthals. Remember, we bring all these people up, the JP Connings, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, US dollar. Look at all the hedge funds. They still have it on their balance sheets, right? And now Balaji brought home the point yesterday that, okay, balance sheets is one thing, and hedge funds and Wall Street and financialization is one thing. But just look at the US dollar in terms of global trade, right? Already people are using the Chinese yuan, right? There's a few ways to look at global reserve currency. It's not just what's on a balance sheet. Look at the amount of invoice factoring, invoice financing that goes on with money other than the US dollar. Look at all the announcements that have happened in the past week, right? Now we get the petrodollar finished, right? The Saudi prince has realigned Middle Eastern dynamics, right? And Wall Street Silver here says the petrodollar is dead. One of the key supports of the US dollar since 1971, when we ended the gold standard. And it's about what we've been talking about here for a few days. Everything going on with Saudi, right? How about this? This is from Michael O. Fallon, Sovereign Nations. Please think about what truly newsworthy items have now been buried with the indictment of Donald Trump. Russia, China, Iran, Brazil, Saudi, and the BRI alliance, the acceleration of CBDC and the destruction of the US dollar, the reduction of oil production by OPEC, and dangerously low US oil reserves. Ben Rickert says this morning that Mexico has formally applied to join BRICS now, and this new shitcoin to trade energy. Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. Japan. The US system doesn't work unless Japan, China, and Korea are buying US debt. If there's no currency manipulation, it's a different scenario. Now, it's probably better in some ways for US manufacturing and other things, right? We've talked about how there's probably no need for the US to have global reserve currency any longer because it's become a net negative for the United States. It's probably what's adding to America's waistline, right? Because America's become a nation of consumers, subsidizing their consumption, subsidizing their gluttony, subsidizing their narcissism by currency manipulation. So the privilege of having the global reserve currency also comes with drawbacks. It's great for Washington. It's great for New York. It's great for San Francisco and other finance hubs, but it's not so great for manufacturing and export things, nor is it great for U.S. wages, right? So it's had a terrible effect over the years on that stuff. So lots of people picking up on how this is such a maybe a good thing, right? Maybe a good thing, but nevertheless, it's a major change. It's a major, major change. And for Trump now to come out and actually deal with reality about the US dollar means he's even open to a pivot. I can see him becoming much more of a fan of Bitcoin now because his options are somewhat limited, right? He's got to fight for trade and he's not going to be dealing with the US dollar characterized the same way. So things are definitely changing on that level in an important way. And now we get a bit of a wink from the simulation because here's the big wild card in all of this, right? Here's the huge wild card in everything that's going on. And I mentioned earlier the idea, the rumored idea. I'm doing some mind reading here. I am perhaps hallucinating, but I've heard this. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But we're going to go under the assumption it is. I just mentioned it. It is this idea that strategists, political strategists, helped push this indictment on Trump because it would hobble him in the general election, but help him become the Republican nominee because people who are captive to his audience would do the Woodstock thing, would do the save democracy, we gotta save democracy stuff, right? And they would do the Woodstock boomer save democracy, line up on the streets and wave flags and hopefully propel them. And they believe that because of January 6th and because of whatever violence comes out of this and these protests, they would have enough to bury him in the general election, right? So that was the political calculation. According to some people whom I'm copying, I have no proof, definitely mind reading. Might not be the case. Don't know what Alvin Bragg was thinking. Don't know what Joe Biden is thinking. Don't know what any of these people are thinking. It's just what people have assumed and guessed based on the circumstances. So it's speculation, right? It is speculation. But I would say reasoned speculation with more than an ounce of truth to it, right? So here's the big difference. Here's the big wild card. After COVID and everything that happened since COVID, Americans have changed more than maybe any time in their history. We are not the same people we were before COVID. We are not the same people we were before the 2020 election. A lot has happened in the meantime. So many things have happened. And again, why we call it the breakup is because of these differences, this toxic relationship, ending a toxic relationship, starting something new, seeing the world in a whole new light, starting over in some ways. And what has happened in the past few years, especially with COVID, the lockdowns, Fauci, and here's the simulation part, it's been 1 year to the day since Elon Musk first took his board seat in Twitter and gave them whatever $1 billion it cost to be enough of an owner to get the board seat, right? That's been a year to the day. That happened today, 1 year ago today. And look at how much has changed, right? We now understand exactly what happened with the psychological manipulation of Americans and people around the world with COVID, right? We have a million receipts on that. We've seen the Twitter files. We've seen First Amendment rights broken. There is no more living under an illusion, just like what Bukele said, right? That America can no longer sit on the moral high ground and project this argument of democracy and we're the great exporters of democracy and you have to follow us. That is enough right there to change the entire situation. Now, it's not just that, right? Americans have become more savvy to these tools. They become more understanding of what Bitcoiners have understood for a while, that the projection of power, using money, using words, using decrees behind the fiat has nothing backing it. It's all a psychological construct, and we can choose which psychological construct we use to orient our commercial activity, our innovation, and all these other things, right? So we have changed so much in just a short amount of time that this scenario, right? This scenario of um, being an NPC caught in the political fight is less and less relevant, and more people are escaping from it. Now, they're escaping from it. Bitcoin is one of the main off ramps. COVID was a main off ramp. The finance and crashing of the US dollar and everything that's going on with the petrodollar changing is another off ramp, right? But did you know? And here's another weird coincidence, right? Here's, it's been a year, 1 year to the day since Elon Musk took the board seat at Twitter and started his process of taking over Twitter, opening the door to brand new conversations, brand new ways of seeing it, brand new historical record of what happened in COVID, and people starting to coalesce around it, agree on it. It's also caused all kinds of folks to experiment with other platforms. Nostr becoming a big deal now. Nostr being a place where you're not going to see a lot of violent videos. You're not going to see a lot of the stuff that just perpetuates this echo chamber and keeps people as NPCs locked in political fights. I haven't seen any stupid political fights on Nostr. I've seen only people sharing positive information, helpful information, useful information to navigate World War III and everything else that we're going through. So it's been 1 year since that, but it's been 90 years to the day, 90 years to the day. April 5th, 1933 was the day that the President of the United States, under executive order, took the gold certificates and gold bullion, gold coins, and forced their sale and convertibility for US dollars. It's been 90 years to the day where the United States made gold possession and custody illegal, right? It's been 90 years to the day. So, to the day, 90 years. Now, we can predict that this is coming again for Bitcoin, right? We've seen everything with the financial crash. We've seen now, because of what's going on Twitter and Nostr and our ability to communicate, nowhere near what it was 2 years ago, nowhere near what it was 3 years ago. Even the idea that we are capable of so much terrible behavior from the part of our government. I mean, even I, who is a skeptic, was absolutely no a skeptic of our system, who had spent a lot of time at the highest levels of our system, working in an executive branch capacity for Canada. Not America, but at least the G7 and at least on the playing field of the major leagues. I did not assume that the amount of corruption that we saw through the Twitter files was even possible until I saw what happened during COVID. Even people who practiced it didn't know how bad things really were. Even people who had an amazing vantage point didn't know how bad things were. And now we know. That means we're totally different. And now that we're here predicting that this thing can happen with the money too, right? That the same thing that happened 90 years ago to this day, the confiscation of gold by the President of the United States of Americans, right? The confiscation of American people's gold by the US executive branch is looming above Bitcoiners today. And that's why we've been predicting this is a problem forever. Now, there's this idea that, you hear this stupid definition all the time of money, right? What is money, right? And everyone, it's a store of value and it's a medium of exchange and a record of account, right? You remember the old Andreas Antonopoulos speech from years ago? There's a fourth one. It's a system of control. And that's the one you never hear about. You never hear about the other part of the definition of money being a system of control. You hear about the other three. Unit of account. You don't hear about the system of control piece, right? You don't hear about how it orients, how it activates, how it coordinates economic activity. You don't hear about that part. That's not the definition that people are talking about very often, right? And now that you see all the forces aligning against Bitcoin, you got to understand Bitcoin ain't gold. It ain't gold. The options that the executive branch had 90 years ago today are not the same as they are today because of Bitcoin. Bitcoin allows you to opt out of that system of control. Just like our options for debating things online with Nostr, with Elon Musk in charge of Twitter are not even close to the same as they were a year ago. So Americans have changed in the last 3 years, maybe more than they've ever changed in any previous time over such a short period of time. It's often what I've said about America, and it's an amazing thing about America. No country, because people always complain, oh, you just need gun laws, you just need to get your democracy in order, you need to, shape up your institutions. It's so much chaos and all this stuff. Now, remember, no country in the history of mankind, there isn't another one that has changed over its history as much as America has. America genocides its generation that came before every generation. I mean, they just destroy it, right? We destroy the things our grandparents made each and every generation, each time, right? It just keeps happening. We completely upend the entire country. We completely change how we do things. We completely start fresh. And the reason we can do that, the reason America is able to do that is simply because it's not top down. You're not living with the bright ideas of leaders like Roosevelt's confiscating gold perpetually. These things happen over time, right? America doesn't always get it right. You're still dealing with lipstick on a pig because you're dealing with democracy itself, right? It's never going to be that pretty. And it's more and more clear that it's not the right vehicle or not the best vehicle for the expression of freedom and all these other things because of the systems of control like money. But what we see now is that because Americans have changed so much in the past few years, they're right in line with their historical trend of bottom up change. This is not the first time America's completely reinvented itself. It does it a lot, and it's happening before our eyes. Under the surface, Americans are not the same people anymore. You've got guys like RFK who are speaking on behalf of, I'd say, a lot of Democrats who are sick of this shit, right? Sick of seeing lying folks in the media, sick of the media itself, right? Sick of the brainwashing, sick of the narrative control, sick of the psyops, sick of the projection, sick of all of the anxiety that comes from just watching the news on a regular, normal day. And, now we have those two big changes, right? Two big changes. We have Bitcoin, 90 years to the day that the last major executive control against the economy, against individual expression in the economy happened when this gold was confiscated. And 1 year to the day that our communications ability totally changed. So simultaneous, you have these two big changes. And again, it's all in the context as well of what's going on with de-dollarization, with political enthusiasm waning, right? The waning political enthusiasm. I thought I brought another quote here that I want to find about how different Americans are, but I might not have put it in here. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. So there's the 90-year thing, there's the big change. And what it makes me think about, and that's going to come down here, is the following. And this is why I think this bottom up piece is going to be led by Bitcoiners. Why I continue to predict that the final battle is between the woke people who are just completely brainwashed, and it might still be some of these right wing folks. I think eventually this will destabilize into just one NPC woke character. I don't think the right wing folks are going to be able to maintain adherence to the uniparty battle anymore. I think the real questions are going to bubble to the surface: money, systems of control, systems of let's call it propaganda and psyops, right? Systems of control. You're going to have more of a accurate, on top of the target conversation about these things, and so it's going to push into the different extremes. And it is the final battle, I think, is the wokes versus the Bitcoiners, and it's between the top down and the bottom up people. But here's our main advantage, right? I've often called Bitcoiners alchemists, right? We're alchemists. We're here to manifest heaven on earth. We're here to follow our energy and turn the things we touch into gold. So the idea that alchemy was not about turning metal into gold, but about following your own instinct and finding gold through your energy and through your ability to your ability to manipulate the world around you and turn things into something like gold, right? And there is an actual definition of this kind of alchemy. It's a psychological one, a little bit on the metaphysical level, but it's called autotelic alchemy. Autotelic, and the definition of autotelic is this rewarding balance between the challenge of play, right? So fun and happy and all that, right? You have an incitement to do something because it's playful and interesting and not stressed out and all these crazy things. So it's the balance between the play of finding a challenge and the work of mastering something, right? And these two things together are, I've talked about genius, for example, the definition of genius being the balance between your creative side and your logical side, and having both of those things manifest at sort of world-class levels is how you end up getting a genius. But this is very similar, right? This is the creative aspect of play, the challenge of finding something that inspires you, that gets you up in the morning, that gives you self-propelled energy that doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the ground up. It comes from inside of you. It makes you put one foot in front of the other. It makes you write an email. It makes you communicate with someone. It makes you get out of bed, motivated and charged. And then, of course, the work of skill building, the drudgery, the slowness, the even on coming together every morning, these little things where I got to fix the audio and fix the thing and new system, and that's the boring shit, right? But I have the autotelic motivation to do it because what we're doing here is changing the entire world, right? We are all alchemists that have to manifest heaven on earth. Otherwise, we're going to lose. It's not guaranteed we're going to win this fight, right? And Bitcoiners have an important role here. And that's why we do things like, build systems to communicate in our own way that can't be censored, that we can have more confidence in. That's why we share all kinds of information about our personal health. And again, go back to those 3 years. Think about how much Bitcoiners themselves have changed in the last 3 years. Right? There was a time 3 years ago, before all of this stuff, that you could be, maybe not so interested. Doesn't mean no one is trying to say fat shame or anything like that, right? This is craving for food and all that stuff is complicated. But Bitcoiners can share this stuff openly and share diet advice, share um, 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 physical fitness advice very openly and all the time. At our show in Miami, May 18th to 20th, you're going to see a lot of folks who are from that bro science background, right? Talking about and motivating people on Twitter and on Nostr every day to uh, do the right amount of walking, do the right amount of exercise, just so that your own energy for this fight is there, so that you can help push Bitcoin into the future. And it's sort of motivating, and people do it for all the right reasons, I would say. But in the end, you are going to deal with people who are either programmed from the top down, who believe in a system of control of money, especially tied to energy, versus the people who believe in a decentralized energetic system, decentralized energetic grids, in far more personal responsibility when it comes to health. These things were not as obvious 3 years ago. So, to bring it back to the point about America, I'm not sitting here hoping for America to solve its problems with democracy, right? That's not what I think is going to win the day. I think the democratic process is going to bring us some benefits because of the things that are breaking and the changes that are going to come. I don't think they're necessary. I think Bitcoiners have already changed enough inside of themselves to push this forward. And there's more coming, right? There's more people joining this movement, more people joining the battlefront on these lines, and joining the battlefront from the point of view of bottom up efficiencies, which means being healthy, being cognizant, being self-motivated, self-directed. You hear it work all the time. You got to start your own engine. You might hear that sometimes. You got to start your own engine. Well, Bitcoiners can start their own engine very easily, right? Because we understand that this is not about making a buck. It's about changing the world in a very positive way. And we're closer and closer every day with the more changes we make to ourselves, the greater ability to guide our own lives in a healthy way, to guide our own financial lives in a healthy way, and those pieces are going to help us create a better world soon. I mean, that's the thing that I continue to marvel at, how soon all of this is coming. Right? I've always been a person who had Bitcoin on a much shorter time frame to take over, and I keep asking the AI to write time machine scripts for me, and every time it keeps suggesting creating energy markets settled in Bitcoin. And I think that's the key. If you, in the next couple of years, is this a reasonable prediction, right? Tell me how reasonable prediction um, uh, tell me how reasonable prediction this is. We can create a Bitcoin settled energy market today, right? So we have all these shitcoin exchanges already. That's not the only exchange you can have for Bitcoin. You can have a Bitcoin settled energy exchange, right? You can have oil futures, gas futures, all those things settled in Bitcoin. The same derivative contracts, the same commodity contracts you see on energy markets today, just settled in Bitcoin. Because that's all they're talking about with BRICS, by the way. That's it. The whole thing about BRICS is have a exchange, a marketplace for energy that is not 100% US dollar, that can be settled in other things like the Chinese renminbi, and that is a major challenge to the US dollar. Well, I don't think it's gonna. That dog ain't gonna hunt, right? No one's gonna give their money for energy and have Chinese policy wrapped up in it. Nor will they do it with South Africa or Russia or any of these other shitholes. You're gonna see a desire amongst wealthy people, amongst folks trading, to push another system. So you can imagine in 3-4 years, if the other one fails, if the US dollar is no longer credible for this energy market, you can imagine a Bitcoin settled energy market with financing features to help finance nuclear energy, to help finance all kinds of stuff. And if that's in place, it's already a Bitcoin standard. We already win. Right? The system of control is gone at that point. The system of control is gone at that point. So we're getting there quick, everyone. We're getting there quick. All right, let's see. Got a bunch of comments here. Uh, let's go back to the Elizabeth Warren. Or no, I did this one's first. When I was young, we believed, even though it was probably not true, that the U.S. were the good guys. Yeah, well, I mean, we'll definitely have to review history. I don't think it's as it's easy to see American short-term history even as really bad in the past 2 years or the past 80 years since World War II. I don't think it's going to be that clear cut. I think you're going to see that there was a fight. I think once we understand, all shall be revealed, right? We're going to have a big understanding of all of this stuff shortly, right? Just like at our show in Miami, you're going to hear all about energy markets. You're going to hear way more about the path out of this. Once we get out of it, I think we're going to be able to look back and we'll see good and bad. We're going to see good and bad, right? It won't be so simple that we were the bad guys. I don't think it's a pure reversal of good guys, but I agree. That's why I call the show The Breakup. We have to break up with this idea of America as the good guy all the time. That's a major problem, a major problem. It's what I've said is the thing that will, in the end, bring us closer to the Chinese people. The Chinese people don't have the limitation Americans have because of the patriotism around the dollar, right? That's a limitation Americans have to bring on a Bitcoin standard. Just like Trump has to get rid of that limitation if he's going to really change America, right? I think. But unfortunately, American patriotism, which has a lot of good qualities, right? I'm a fan in general of American patriotism. It's just tied up. It should be tied up exclusively in like barbecue and music and baseball. It shouldn't be tied up in the dollar, right? The dollar is 100 and something years old. Who cares? Says Bitcoins can make a dartboard out of Bitcoin. you, the dartboard one is going to go down. It's just amazing. It's like a stupid. Remember when SBF was like SBF on boxes, right? You take a box when he was trying to explain shit coins. You take a box and then you put more coins in a box, and then you have a box and you put coins in a box on boxes, as Alan Farrington once said. Flash says, "Good morning. I finally caught you live. Yeah, I'm going to answer your question below too on Noster in a second. I noticed that one. Glad you made it, Flash. Thanks to Grandma, I will forever see USD equals dartboard money. Yeah, dartboard money." Bud bringing up the gold confiscation here. 90 years to go to 90 years ago today, guys. 90 years ago today. Therefore, we have a difficulty epoch of 2016. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. 6102. Yeah. Like the good mnemonic though. Yeah. Simulator can run in reverse. Looks like it. Give the man a thumbs up. Indeed, smash the like button. We love likes, guys. Genius comes from jinn, as in genie in a bottle. Yeah, the jinn is the those are forces in the Muslim faith as well, as I understand, right? They're kind of like ghosts. Yeah, thanks. Smash and smash. Got some lightning, thunder, flash, mining. And it's the only way to the death sphere. There's no fixing that. Yeah. Oh. We share because we see a big, bright orange future and we want to be around it. Exactly. I mean, again, it's like I say a lot, right? Because we can picture the future without as much difficulty as fiat people, or at least the vision is so much more pleasant. We are incited to do it. That is very motivating, right? It's very motivating. We see a just and fair future. Either, I mean, I tell my kids all the time they're growing up in a golden age, and I think they are. Right? I think they're completely unaware of what's going on around. Obviously, they never had to wear a mask in COVID. I just hid them from all of that stuff, and there were ways, right? There were ways. We scammed the border all the time, right? How does one get on Nostr? It's real easy, Flash. You just got to create a key pair. That's it. There's no other. Then I'd say if you're on Apple, Damus is the easiest interface. I use some of the web clients, and they were a little iffy about. They're not as smooth as putting a profile pic and things like that. The thing you got to know is there's no endemic memory, so it's not going to hold your profile pic. You've got to refer it to things online, images that have been published and things like that. So, but other than that, there is no like making an account. It's just generate key pairs, and the signing key is the key. So that will allow you to post, having a signing key, just like having a key in Bitcoin will allow you to post. It's actually an amazing. Oh, there it is. Yeah, Damus or Amethyst for Android. I haven't used the Amethyst, so I can't speak to it. But Damus is the beginner client. Yeah, and Flash, check out BTC Sessions tutorial on Nostr. I would say the BTC Sessions one, the one I used his one originally from back at Christmas time, he only goes into the web clients. I haven't seen his new one since. If he's done a Damus one, do that. I had a way easier time with Damus. I used it for like 2 weeks before Damus came out and found it, it was difficult in the sense that there were a lot of things that weren't intuitive. So there you go. Fam Van, thank you. I'll check it out. Great Flash. Awesome. See ya. Where do I sats? Thanks for joining, my man. See ya. Russia briefly talked about selling their oil for BTC. Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. They briefly talked about it. Okay, so this is I think this is where Jin was like a legacy idea that Islam absorbed from the local religions. So what you're saying here is that Jinn, the spirit within, Aladdin, most famous for the Jinn, yeah, about realizing the spirit within over choosing the ego. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, about becoming yourself. Yeah, so it's a lot of Jungian shadow and stuff like that. Yeah. 1 BTC equals. Very good. Another great show. Thanks, Dex. I appreciate it. Yeah, the dev frequency update on demo. I've noticed. Yeah, it works way better already from when I started using it. I find myself using it a little bit every day. The Jungian self, correct? Yeah. All right, team. Have a great day. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it every day. Oops, I'll make sure we get the. I like leaving it with a advertisement for the show. Peace, team. See you tomorrow.